So Beth and I visited Monterey Middle School, and we were in a grade 6 classroom with the teacher's name was Katie Connolly. It was actually a bring your own device, so BOYD. So the yeah, is that what I said? Oh.
Small detail, whatever.
So, okay, anyways, you know what I mean. And so the kids have been working with technology over the course of the year, and most of them bring their own laptops, tablets, or phones. But the school also has Apple iPads that the kids can sign out and use. And the teacher mentioned they wish that they'd used Chromebooks because they're actually more compatible with the Google Apps for Education. Yeah, so the app that we were working with, so when we arrived, they were having a math lesson, and so we were given a worksheet on the Canadian Charter of Rights, and it was like 4 pages long, and Beth and I got to make a Kahoot, which is like an online quiz for them, so it's an alternative way to quiz the students.
Yeah, Kahoot's really cool. So basically when you're making it, so you get a page for the question and you enter the question title, you can upload a picture to have up behind the question, and then there are always multiple choice questions, so you can put in, you have 4 options of answers you can put in, and more than one could be right, or you can just have one that's right. And then, so you just move on. We made a quiz that was about 10 questions long, and what happens when they're doing the quiz is everybody signs in at once and makes names for themselves and everything. And so the question, it's timed, so you can set a time also, like usually between 10 and 30 seconds, depending on how challenging the question is. And then, so everybody signs in, so the question goes up on the board and everybody's on their devices and they're answering. The way they did it when we were there was they were in teams, so they're in pairs. Yeah, and so they answer the question, and then what pops up is the first 5 people who have the most points after every question. Yeah,
we have a little video. The popping up with like the winners made the kids really competitive, but it also didn't show who came last. So it didn't matter if you came last, second last, third last. It only showed the top 4. So it made you want to get it right and come top. But if you didn't get it right, no one knew. So this is just a little clip of the kids playing it. It's kind of crazy loud. It was a little bit loud, but it worked.
What makes it? Why? I don't know.
So the questions, it looks confusing because it's just colors. The question is up on the projector, which means the kids have to look up and see the questions and answer. Yeah. Oh, shoot, sorry.
No, I did green. I did red. Right. Oh shoot, I'm on the internet. Down. I don't know.
You answered the website. They're guessing right.
So they're given the question for 10 seconds. So you can, so the teacher makes it, and you can put in pictures and all your options. And ours was 10 questions long. We didn't actually have time to do the worksheet ahead of time, so we actually did the quiz before the worksheet, which is a good indicator to see what kids know before reading. So it'd be interesting to do this again after they've read the worksheet as an assessment to see what they've learned. Obviously this is not a formal assessment. They're working in partners, they're talking, they're chatting, but it's a good check-in.
They get really excited about it. They're all engaged, they're all looking at the screen, and it's super competitive.
Some of them were really hard questions too. So the other interesting part of being in a tech-savvy class was the free time they got to work on, they were given 3 options. They could work on Duolingo, which is an app they use to practice French, Spelling City to work on their spelling tests, and it's like fun games for speed, as well as they were using Google Docs to work on an essay.
And extra math also.
And extra math. Each of these apps checked in with the teacher, so if they completed a lesson on Duolingo, it then took that lesson and sent it to the teacher. So she got feedback on how many lessons someone had completed, how far along. So it was quite clear which students were racing ahead and which students needed to complete more lessons. There was, like the class had a mandatory by a certain date that they had to complete. And I
Kids were really racing ahead though. Some kids were like on lesson 250 and some kids were on lesson 3. Because there were people who were really dedicated, wanted to learn, but there were some people who just didn't care. And the only other problem with Duolingo I saw was when I was walking around, I was talking to this one kid while he did it, and the lessons, one of them was just matching, so it wasn't necessarily that he knew what the words were, because he was getting them wrong a bunch, but eventually you get the right ones.
Yeah. The other thing with Duolingo is there's a speaking component to it, but a lot of the kids weren't speaking because they're sitting in a quiet classroom, and so they would just skip over that bit. So they weren't really practicing their oral French. But there was an ELL student who'd only moved from China 4 months ago, and she was able to do it from English to Chinese. So that was her way of practicing. Yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah, so the apps like these, where they can be all over the place, I think it's really interesting to see, like it allows kids who want to go ahead, but it also allows the teacher to see who might need more one-on-one help.
And they're also working on essays, so we were there for 2 blocks in the morning, and in the second block, half the class went away to strings, and then half of them were there working on their essays. What's really cool about Bring Your Own Device is that some people were working on their essays on computers, some people were on iPads, some people were writing complete essays on their cell phones. And that's just what worked for them. But another thing I noticed was it was a lot easier to monitor who was actually working when half the class was at strings, because otherwise it's loud, it's noisy, you don't know who's texting, you don't know who's actually doing what they're supposed to, and what we saw a lot was that kid would be occupied with one kid, and the rest of the class would just be talking. So it's hard to monitor Bring Your Own Device.
Yeah, so if we do this again, I think the only thing we'd change is maybe doing the worksheet before if we had time. It was a bit of a wonky day just because half the class had to go out to strings and then some kids had special testing. Yeah, in the picture there is Katie teaching a math class, and she'd originally planned to do it on the projector, but as everyone who's worked with technology knows, there's technical difficulties, and the Wi-Fi wasn't connecting, and so she had it already planned. She just pulled the board up, and she had the lines all ready to go, and she could just move on with her lesson. And she called it a workaround, and all the kids knew what that meant, and so they knew that if their technology wasn't working, that they could just do it another way. Oh, and other interesting thing, we asked the kids, they all went out for recess, and they all left their phones on their desk. And so we asked them, do you have to leave your phone, or are you allowed your phone on the playground? They are allowed their phones on the playground, but because they used them in class, they didn't feel the need to take them outside. And they also said previously, one day they'd all brought their phones out and none of them talked to any of their friends. So at 11, they already are making the connections that we don't need our phones, we want to interact with our friends, and that's because they use their phones for work, so they don't want to interact with school.
Thank you. One question. I'll give you one question. Sorry, Victoria, you got a question? Okay, Kinga?
I'm just wondering for that testing program, how does the teacher keep track of where the students are at? Or is it just this kind of fun program?
No, so the way it works is the teacher makes the online quiz and has a promo code, and the kids go in and put the code in, and they also have to put their name in.
Okay.
And so the teacher will see
Okay, so
the students. So the kids can't see who answers what. And I think you can save it afterwards. We didn't save the information.
We had to run pretty fast afterwards because we had to go to brief vote, but.
I was just wondering if the teacher was able to go back over this quiz and say, this student took in like 3 or 4 tries, or this student.
You
Well,
only
there
get
are
the one try for this one.
Because they're
the quiz is
timed
just-
questions, the whole class does it all at once.
Yeah, but I think there is a way of keeping the information and seeing for the teacher, not for the kids, so it's different.
Who's guessing and who's actually figuring it out?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yay!
Thank you.
But she's